Hi everyone! In this section, we're going to talk about the DevOps architecture for the enterprise. So, before learning the DevSecOps, it is going to be quite beneficial for you, firstly, to learn the DevOps architecture, which is what you're going to be doing in this section, and then moving to everything related to DevSecOps. So, in this section, we're going to cover a brief introduction to the DevOps in IT delivery, creating reference architecture, introducing DevOps to the companies, and working with the voice model. But let's start with the introduction. So, since this course is going to be focused on implementing DevOps on large scale companies, so we cover all the cases. And so, before we go to the specific challenges for the DevOps and DevSecOps, we need to first have a common understanding for what DevOps is. So, basically, DevOps is the development and operation stages working as one team, and this team builds a product and then runs it. It is that simple. So the DevOps has gained a lot of momentum over the past decade, essentially in enterprises. But actually implementing the DevOps is a difficult part. The reason for this is that enterprises are not organized in a structure that works for DevOps. This is because in the last century, most enterprises outsourced a lot of their IT. And for that reason, DevOps becomes way more difficult when development is done in-house while the operations are outsourced. So by bringing the teams together into development and operations environment, the enterprise can speed up the delivery and release new products and services. And in that way, less handovers are needed between the development and the operations. In that way, the quality of the product will improve since DevOps already includes quality assurance, testing, and security. So here I bring in front of you some of the key benefits for DevOps. The first one is that DevOps brings the business, the development, and the operations together into one properly working system. On the other hand, enterprises having DevOps can respond faster to demands from the market because they're absorbing continuous feedback from their work. In the same way, products are continuously improved and upgraded with new features, instead of planning major next releases and wasting a ton of time to create a complete new project and outsource it. And finally, through the automation and the DevOps pipelines, enterprises can really reduce the costs in terms of both development and operations, and at the same time improve the quality of their products. And when building DevOps, the first and the main starting point is the enterprise architecture. This is where the business goals are set and we define how those goals are met. So the IT delivery is key to meeting those goals. So in large companies, the architecture also defines the IT delivery process, and we will specifically look at the IT delivery and its processes in more detail. So, as I already mentioned, the enterprises typically have operating model that is based on outsourcing. This makes implementing DevOps more complicated. Normally, the enterprise architect will have to have a very clear view of the connection between the different processes and who is responsible for fulfilling those processes. Basically, who is responsible for what, when, and why. And the next question would be how this can be converted to DevOps. So before that, we first need to understand what are the main processes in IT delivery. And I actually bring here in front of you all of those processes, and let's talk a little bit about them. So first, let's start with the business demand. This pretty much covers what are the business needs and understanding on what the requirements are for the product that's been developed. Those requirements are normally set up by the people that are going to use the product or the clients. So customers will demand product that meets specific functionality and quality. So the architecture must focus on the delivery and the end-to-end product to satisfy the requirements that were defined initially. So in DevOps, an assigned product owner makes sure that the product meets those requirements. The product owner will have to work closely with the software designer. And then we move to the next process, which is the business planning. So once the demand is clear, the product needs to be scoped. In DevOps, the product teams typically start with the minimum viable product. So the first iteration of the product that does meet the requirements of the customers is actually called the minimum viable product. So when designing this product, the processes need to be able to support the development and the operation of the product. So the business planning involves the quality management and testing that are two of the major components on the IT delivery. Then it comes the development process. And in DevOps, the product team will work with user stories. A team must break down the product into components that can be defined as deliverables. To do this, we should have clear definition of the user story. And so the user story always have the same format. So any user story need to have an acceptance criteria or the definition of done or DOD. And once the product is developed, then we can talk about deployment. At this stage, the code is tested, validated, and it matches the user stories. And so now it can be deployed into the production state. So the testing and the releasing of the product is normally automated in the pipeline, so that should be easy once set up at once. So before the code is actually pushed to the production, it also needs to be merged with the configuration. You need to think about the security packages that need to be applied to components that can run into production. So at the test and the quality process, the full package consisting of application code and infrastructure components needs to be validated and be ready for production. So the result after the deployment stage, it should be a live product that is ready to use. So when you're performing testing, if bugs or violations to security are discovered, the product needs to be set back to the earlier stage or to the development. And finally, once the product is deployed, then we move to the final process, which is operations. So after deployment, the live product of course needs to be operated. To do this, enterprises work according to the IT service management principles. In fact, the operators are in the same team as developers, but this doesn't mean that the IT service management principles are not valid anymore. For example, when incidents occur, the incident management process should be immediately triggered. So during operations, they could be looking for requirements fulfillment, incident management, problem management, and so on. So with all those delivery components for the IT process, DevOps actually adds the continuous integration and the continuous delivery, or the CI/CD. You might heard about it, and this is one of the most important concepts when talking about DevOps and pipelines. So let's talk about this. Let's first talk about what is continuous integration. So continuous integration, or CI, is built on the principle for shared repository where the code is frequently updated and it is shared across all the teams that work into a cloud environment. The continuous integration allows developers to work together on the same code at the same time. And so changes into that code are directly integrated and ready to be fully tested in different test environments. On the other side, the continuous delivery is the automated transfer of software to test environments. So the ultimate goal of the continuous delivery is to bring software to production in a fully automated way. So all the various of the test cases should be performed automatically. So after development, the developers should immediately receive feedback on the functionality of their code. And so due to that, the CI/CD requires a feedback loop, and this is why we say it to be continuous. It needs feedback about the delivered products and services. And so this is then looped back to the developers, and from there, new interactions are planned to improve the product or the service. So this works quite well if a single enterprise controls the full cycle and no processes are outsourced to another organizations. However, for many big enterprises, this is impossible, so they have to outsource. However, sometimes activities are not perceived as core activity, and some companies decide to be more cost efficient and to delegate that to somebody else. However, in the past decade, all those organizations have been through a massive change. the IT departments have become more and more important, and in some cases, the software development has become a core activity. And a good example for that are actually the banks. So all the banks are actually IT companies in these days. So the output of their IT delivery are the financial products. So due to the customer demands, releases of those products with new features have become more frequent and they take sometimes several releases a day. So let's talk a little bit about delivery in a sourcing model. And you can see this on the graph in front of you. So sometimes sourcing can be quite complicated, but if we learn to think in terms of sourcing tires that you can see right here in front of you, it becomes way more comprehensive and easy to understand. So using this model, we can break the IT delivery into three main phases or tires. The first one is the strategic tire or the strategic level, and this is the tire for the enterprise governance. The enterprise defines strategic business goals that are translated to enterprise architecture. So the overall architecture principles are the outcomes of the enterprise architecture and drive all IT architecture, including the DevOps. Then in Tier 2, or the tactical level, is where the IT architecture is developed, including the DevOps. So here is where the service level agreements and the key performance indicators are defined to measure the outcomes of the IT delivery. And finally, the final tier, which is Tier 3, it's called operational or services level. At this tier, the components of the architecture are detailed, including the interfaces to various suppliers and service providers. So the agreements that were defined in Tier 2 should be adopted at this level so that all work that's been done for the development and operations is done in the same way. So in practice, the service providers are normally acting on Tier 2 if they're involved in larger programs spinning on multiple products. So at this tier, the provider is responsible for aligning the different streams in the lower tier or tier 1. So here is how the sourcing models are looking like, guys. This is going to be the end of this video, and in the next one we will talk about creating the reference architecture. Thanks for watching.